Hello everybody, or anybody, whoever's turned up. This figure is Uhtred of Bebbanburg, and he's the leader of the Mercian faction in our new Kickstarter. He seemed to get a lot of attention. He was the glamour boy of the painted miniatures, and so I've decided just to show you how I painted this figure, some of the tips I use, some of the things I don't do, and yes, hopefully you'll have some fun, be able to paint a figure just like this. Hello, here's the miniature. I've undercoated him, and what I normally do is I actually mount them on the base, and I even do the texture on the base, which is really just dirt. It's just dirt I put in the oven just to kind of dry it out, so it works quite well. So yeah, let's begin. What I normally do when I paint miniatures, well, probably most people do it, is you do the areas, the largest areas first. So like the cloak, the chainmail, etc., before you then go on to the straps. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but you know, just lots of what I say is you're probably going to know, but some of the things might be quite handy. So with this miniature, the oily steel is the go-to every time. It's the best paint for authentic looking chainmail. So let's begin with that. All right, so tiny little bit on there. And what I do when I do my chainmail, I use a cheap brush and I cut it flat right near the end. So I mean, this is probably the cheapest kind of brush you can get, but it gives you a really small dry brush. So let's just give this a go. All right, and always wipe off the excess. Okay. And just lightly brush into those areas, into the helmet and the nasal piece, down into there, and now for the sword. Again, this is just your first coat. Right, that's the chainmail done. Okay, right, now, oh yeah, I just talk about the jars that I use here. Right, I've got, and again, I mean, you know, most people already understand this, but just a little additional thing, right? I always use a wide, large, round jar and fill it nearly to the top. And as you can see, look, when I put my paintbrush in, I know exactly how much water's going on that brush, okay? Instead of one of these, not full, and you're kind of guessing where it is, and sometimes you'll even get the metal part go in there, which can always be a horror because you can get a big blob of water on there. So again, just a small thing, but especially when it comes to minute detail and you've got a really, really small brush, you can see there, look, as it touches the water, I know exactly how much water's going on there. So right, we've done the chainmail there, and now it's probably dried, so I give it a little touching with the Newlin oil, okay? I don't use many Games Workshop paints, but their oils, I must admit that I'm very, very impressed with them and the results that they give. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, with oils, with inks, you touch them onto the areas. Okay, and then when you want to take some off, you've just dried your brush and you just touch it and it draws it back off. Okay, so that's more than enough. And then just onto the helmet again, just touch and let it sit. And then when it dries, the pigments, the tiny amounts of pigments that are in these inks will just draw to those areas, almost like those little insects they want to hide up in the crevices there. So, right. That will do for the chainmail. So just show you what that looks like. Right, the next thing, so we don't actually have to wait while this is drying, we go on to the next area, that's the largest area, and we will go straight onto the cloak. Now, let me just get what I've got here. Right, I'm using Vallejo, I call it Vallejo because I'm not Spanish, and this is dark sea blue. Okay, give it a bit of a shake. Now, when I'm painting anything, I always use, for Dark Ages, if you're painting Dark Age figures, always have a pot of this handy and mix a tiny amount of this into every paint you use, and it just gives it that kind of worn look. It just gives you that kind of vibe of Dark Ages, as opposed to using paint straight out of the pot, and it just looks like they're on like theatre kind of things, you know, just or reenactors who just, you know, got issued with the latest kit. So what I do, I mix a small amount of this in with this. Okay, now this is something else that I do. I always use, right, I don't know if you can see this, right, this ink. Now, I mentioned a while ago how I don't really go for the trios. I try and just use a combination of this ink and the one colour, and I just, hopefully this will show you what happens. So I get some black ink, right, and I start at one end of where I've got the paint, and I start to mix it in there. Okay, so you can see I've now got a darker version, and as I drag it through, you can see the black starts to dissipate, and I end up with, as you can see, the darkest through to the lightest, and this lightest part is basically my next but one lightest highlight. So what we'll do, we'll go in, I always do the darkest first and then build up the highlights. So we're in here. And also a good thing is with the ink, because it's really intense black, but it doesn't have any, what's the word for, any volume, any thickness. It's you know, it's effectively like water, but water that's, you know, like, I forget what the word is. And so, right, that's the, I don't know if you can see there. Straight in. Get back to the darker bit. I think I just strayed a little bit away from what I was doing. Okay. Now, the good thing is, as you're moving around the figure, those areas that you did paint, while you're doing this, they're starting to dry up. So, you know, effectively, you can just keep painting a figure until it's finished. You don't have to sit or wander off somewhere or wait anything to happen. So as long as you get the right order of areas to paint, you know, it's right. So sometimes I'm always licking the water off my paintbrush just to take away the wetness. And I'm just looking in there and I thought, well, I don't want too much paint in these folds. So I'm just taking the brush, it's a damp brush, and I'm just moving it into those creases because I didn't want them to be all gunked up. Okay, now there's quite a bit of paint on here. And that's the first coat. Okay, right. What I normally do now, and this is just my personal quirk, I like to get the flesh done. After the chainmail, because there's a lot of dry brushing, I like to do the flesh because nothing's going to threaten the flesh that you put on now once you've done the dry brushing, because the dry brushing is finished. So what I do is I've been using these war paint. I know I harp on about trios, but sometimes something comes onto the market that's absolutely brilliant. And so yeah, look, we've got these war paints, and actually they come in 6 shades, and I think they even do different various kind of like types of flesh as well. But so we're going to start off with, as always, darkest. So I don't have to darken that down because it's actually dark enough. Right. So while that cloak's drying, let's go into this. You can see when I'm using my paintbrush, sometimes it's good to use your little finger or any finger that you've got just to give you leverage. And there's a nice steady way I can actually rotate my hand without this, where I'm not quite sure where I am, and I'll just go boom like that. So again, I'm bending my finger, quite a lot of pressure on it, but it gives me that stability that I need. Remember, this is just the first coat, so it might not give a complete coverage. You can still see a bit of dark there, but that doesn't matter because it's going to be about three goes at this. Okay. Now, when it comes to painting the faces, remembering that you've already got black undercoat on those details, and you don't get many goes at doing a face before you've cocked it up, just because the paint itself, if you have too many goes at it, will clog up that vital facial detail, especially the eyes, okay? Right, I went a little bit onto my oily steel, but yeah, that's enough. Don't worry, you're going to visit it again, but really resist the urge to put too much paint on that face, because you have a few goes at it and it's almost like you're painting latex rubber on it in the end, and all the detail is gone and the figure is ruined. So be really sparse on this, because this is where you can go wrong. So, right, we've got the chainmail done, got the base coat of the cloak and the first layer of flesh. Okay. Right, okay, here we go again. Right, while I'm waiting for the cloak to dry, because with the creases in there, the paint kind of just settles in there and it takes a little bit of time. So look, we're free to do lots of other things. So the next thing I'll do is the tunic, okay, which goes from there through to there. And I chose Field Blue, again, Vallejo paint, just as we go, and a tiniest little amount of the Magic Dark Age Earth, okay. And now, again, as before, I'm going to use some black ink, and if you can see that, we'll start off at the top, right, that's my first coat, and I'll work it down there until we get to this original colour. So again, you can see we've got all the shades and everything in between all ready to use. So we'll start off with the darkest. Right. Now, quite often, you know, if you see reenactors and things, the over tunic is the best quality tunic. Now, quite often it's nice to do them reds, dark greens, etc., etc. But with this figure, for some reason, I wanted to keep it kind of uniform. Now, they're all kind of like interconnected, these colours. You know, I haven't got anything that kind of just breaks the kind of like the rule on this. So let's have a look. Right, we paint right up to, and even over, because you've only just put your first flesh tone on there. So it doesn't matter if you go over, because you will be coming back and visiting that again. So we've got the first layer on there, okay. Now, quite often I paint wet on wet, so what we've got at the moment, my first layer of paint, the dark paint on here, is tacky, so I'm going to go a little bit down the line here. It's almost the original colour, but it means that I can just touch in there, and because this wet is going on tacky, it kind of just feathers into the paint that I've put down before, which can work out quite well. Quite effective. Right, now we can see he's got a nice crease down there, so we paint either side of that crease. Yeah, that works out quite well. And I go to the lightest part now, and the elbows always. Those parts that are obviously sticking out are the ones where you've got to put your lightest highlight on, okay? And also just where the sleeve meets. Now, I'm quite happy with that for now, okay? Now, I'm going to do the under tunic, which is a good flat white, okay? Again, using a little bit of this. In fact, I've used quite a bit, but that doesn't matter. I've still got some saved down there. Tiny bit black. Right, so we'll go with this first. Now, the under tunics are normally a neutral, kind of linen-y colour most times. So it can be a browny linen or a white or whatever. So everything's drying as we're moving along. Now in there and around there. Okay, yeah, I like the way that you could almost think that the colour of the cloak is the same colour as the tunic, which it isn't, but they're complementary colours, which I think is maybe one of the reasons why this guy, he kind of stood out. I don't know whether he would be a vain kind of earl or jarl, and thought, well, hang on, when I go out to battle or when I die, I want to actually be dressed right and put everyone else to shame. So, right, that's that. Okay, so look, we've got the base colours, we've got the chainmail, we've got two shades. No, we've got one shade on the tunic. Right, so while they're drying, I can go back now to the cloak, and I've still got my paint here that's still wet. So I'm going to go for the middle part of it. Now, with cloaks, they're big flat areas and there are very tight creases. So the first thing you do is you just give a highlight to those big flat areas with like one stroke. Don't know if you can see that. And another one just around there. Now we're out here where it's only just dried. Don't know if you can see. So big flat strokes there. And it probably doesn't look like a lot's happening, but you're marking out your territory, if you know what I mean. So you're just breaking up the one dimension. You could probably call it 1.5 dimensions, because it's, if somebody was to walk in the room, let's say they weren't a figure painter, they'd think it was just the same colour. But we know the difference, don't we? And I remember reading this article about a Golden Demon Award way back, and this person was making this point that this guy shaded so delicately that you couldn't actually see it. And when you looked at it, I thought, well, let's just paint it white. And I thought I couldn't quite get my head around that. So, right, that's your first highlights on the cloak. Just turn that round. Can you see there? See there, see there, see there. Now, I haven't gone to the areas around his face. Now, with nearly every figure, when someone picks up a figure, the first thing they look at is the face, and the first thing they look at of the face is the eyes. But then anything else that you've got up around this area here is really, really important. So I'm just going to go to almost like the original colour. Now, with the army paintbrushes, even the regiment painter, look, you've still got a good point on that, so I don't need to change brushes as yet. So there. Now this is the most important one. Go in there and one stroke. Yeah. Now I'm just going to revisit these second layers I've done, just to put the original colour just on the very edges of the cloak, which would be either the lightest or the parts that would have been worn, you know, by the sun, etc., etc. And one there. Okay, just put one down there, even though the shield's going to cover most of that, doesn't matter. Right, let's have a look. I'll just put some of the original colour there. Right, so what have we got in the net so far? We have got 2 shades on the cloak, 2 shades on the tunic. We've only got 1 shade so far on this. So now I'm going to go to the middle of the tunic colour, the under tunic colour, right? And this should pick up quite nicely. Okay, right. And here. I'm always licking the paintbrush to repoint it. Boom, 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 boom. Right. For some reason, when it comes to whites, lots of people would say that they're the most difficult colours to paint, and they probably are, but when you're doing off-whites, they're perhaps the easiest ones to do, because it doesn't take much. You don't actually have to do much, So effectively it's just those one or two really, really sticky out points on the cusp of the creases that bring this all to life. So what I'll do, I just get a little bit more white. So I'm almost at the original white colour, okay? And now, right, where his knee is pushing the tunic out, we'll go there. Where his hips, as he's moving, are just pushing that out. Again, get the point on the tip, because now we're going into these. This is an important one. Yep, yep. And there's, I don't know if you can see it here, but there is a tiny little area there that we want to catch, and there, and just up there again. Now, I'm going to do one more. I can see it's down here, and see it. And as you can see, it does just pop when you just do those last bits of almost, it's kind of off-white I started with anyway, but okay, so as you can see, I'll bring them a bit closer. There, and we'll just turn him round so we know where we are. Okay, right, be back soon.